Last and final speaker is Dr. Reggie Raju. He's going to talk to us about open publishing, a social justice imperative for African development.
Thank you very much, Lucille. I must also thank Glenn for inviting me to speak this afternoon. I also would want to try and link some of the earlier discussions where Professor Rentier talked about citation. How does that link to open access, and what does it mean for open access? I am going to go fairly fast. I was told by Lucille I have to finish in 20 minutes. I offered her some sweets, but they didn't sell, so. But at the same time, I'm hoping that I do have a few minutes just to show you some of the things that we are doing at the University of Cape Town. Those of you that had lunch, I hope you can keep it down after watching some of these things. But be that as it may, there you go. In an era where there is a glut of information, much of which is accessible virtually, the global South is challenged by what I call an access to information dearth. The dearth is extended to academic institutions, including South African universities, which has negatively impacted the research output of these institutions. The spiraling costs of subscriptions is one of the most significant contributors to limited access to scholarly literature. With regard to books, we are aware of the fact that many African libraries haven't bought a textbook for the last 10 years. There are a number of African universities that have 1, 2, maybe maximum 3 journal subscriptions. So you can understand the dire need for access to information. And when we talked about the fact that we are at the end of the world's production chain, access to information is critical for that production. In South Africa, nobody can deny that the last 18 months has taught librarians important lessons. The student leadership in the main are oblivious to the tight acquisitions budget. Their demand is for free, quality, decolonized education. As much as we have our own viewpoint on the demands of the students, we cannot ignore the demands for a decolonized higher education. This demand must be viewed against the backdrop of small markets for African content, rendering such publications a financial risk for small African publishers. And for large international publishers, they have no interest because the profit margins are minuscule. One of the possible ways in which we can move forward is for libraries to play a more proactive role. This morning we talked about disruption. We as librarians, for me, disruption is moving away from your comfort zone. For many years, we spent our lives talking about reference queries. At this point in time, the students don't need us to do reference queries. In fact, they can teach us how to find information. But we still persist with that. We need to get away from that comfort zone. And we need to engage in services that render us relevant. And one of those proactive roles is that of library as a publisher. This role is gaining momentum, albeit very, very slowly. The focus of this presentation is, I'm going too fast on mine, is on the publication of monographs and textbooks. I think I'm the first that's now looking at textbooks. Between open publishing and social justice. This morning we heard Bernard Rentier talk about sharing, but we forgot that the primary reason that open access started was because it was a social justice imperative. We forgot about that. We're using everything else to sell this concept. The services provided by UCT libraries demonstrate how librarians can address the issue of publishing local content, the whole issue of decolonized information, local information. We can publish that. And to make these local texts available to the rest of the country and to the continent. We must not forget, as much as we say tongue-in-cheek that South Africa is not in Africa, but we are still part of Africa, and we mustn't forget that. There is also talk about us looking for international publishers to publish local content, to publish content cheaply. No matter however you slice that, somebody still has to pay, be it the student or the library. And given those tight budgets, that's not affordable. I do apologize, I'm going to get into a little bit of theoretical issues now, but please forgive me for going down this road. We talked about social justice. Social justice is basically a praxis of inclusion in which society provides all individuals with equal opportunities. Further, it is usually conceptualized within the ambit of the redistribution of resources to improve the situation of the disadvantaged. It is a lived concept that encompasses acts of fairness, equality, and justness towards each other. The toll on scholarly output in the current distribution of publication system restricts those who cannot afford to pay for access to research. All this does is marginalize them from the learning and or research processes. Further, limited access to scholarly content negatively impacts research production as information is necessary for the generation of new information. So if you don't have access to information, how can you produce new information? And that is why Africa is at the bottom end of the world's knowledge production chain. This toll system fuels the exclusionary tendencies of the academy and promotes elitism. The ultimate effect of the toll is the systematic exclusion, and this may be by default, of the poor from accessing and contributing to research done in particular fields. The knock-on effect of this exclusionary practice relegates the global south to the furthest point in the world's knowledge production chain. In the African context, the social justice pillar of open access must be exploited to advance the eradication of information poverty and information unfairness. The open access movement is guided by the principle that access to information, which is an absolute necessity for any level of growth and development, must be made available free to all end users. This morning when Bernard was talking about researchers not having access to it, but research done by Spark shows that 60% of the research is read by the lay person. I always thought research was for researchers, but the lay persons are reading that. And they also found that a 16-year-old had actually identified a strain of cancer by having access to that information. Social justice challenges structures that perpetuate poverty and injustice. And this is down to the eradication of information poverty and injustice. Open publishing is one way of eradicating information poverty. As much as librarians are open access advocates and appreciate the social justice imperatives of open access publishing has been marketed to the researchers in terms of the benefits that they derive from engaging with open access processes. We heard Bernard this morning talking about citation and downloads. For many years, significant attention has been given to the benefits of freely sharing scholarly information with the largest reading audience possible. As much as the openness movement has very altruistic underpinnings, it is marketed to researchers as a process to improve downloads and citation. As librarians, and I think earlier on we talked about, Eve talked about the impact factor, we accept that the current mode of acknowledging excellence in research is via the impact factor and indices. Hence, we're using that as a marketing strategy for using for the increase in downloads and citation so that we can get buy-in from the research and the administrators. Barrier-free access to scholarly information is a necessary component of our education system, especially for those researchers in developing countries who have limited access to much of the scholarly okay, I'm sure there's something in the juice this lunchtime. Literature published in subscription journals. It is just not affordable. Even previously advantaged institutions like the University of Cape Town has been forced to cut the journal subscription. Many librarians champion the openness movement as it is their belief that making scholarship and information freely accessible to all users is in line with their ideals and professional obligations. For many decades, researchers were prepared to donate their intellectual output to large publishing houses in exchange for visibility. Exacerbating this generosity gesture is the carrot, and that is the growing importance of the impact factor. The pursuit of improved visibility and accessibility, and the ultimate result of an increase in downloads and citation count give legitimacy to impact factor. As much as this legitimacy is challenged, the status quo dictates that downloads and citations is a current method of affirming the contribution of research output. Open access advocates, and I must confess, I am one of those, have fallen into the trap of using pragmatic measures to promote openness. Or with all good intentions, these advocates utilize these pragmatic approaches but have overlooked the powerful altruistic and social justice impact of improving access to critical content to marginalized communities. Universities with a social justice or a social responsiveness mission need to ensure that their research output is part of public conversation. It is a public good. Open access to scholarly output must be seen as contributing a vital academic commodity grounded on its social good status. In reclaiming the role as disseminators of scholarly content, for democratic discourse, librarians need to strongly advance the principles of social justice. Social justice and moral obligation must become explicit drivers of open access. Open access must be driven by social justice and altruistic principles. And this, as I indicated, this is what has given birth to the open access movement, the whole open access movement. And those institutions that are relatively advantaged have a moral obligation to share their output and not to use open access platforms simply to grow the institutional or the researcher profile. The emphasis must be on development. There are a number of ways in which libraries have contributed and will continue to contribute to ensuring that information is accessible to the marginalized. Academic libraries have done exceptionally well in creating and managing open access repositories to ensure that scholarly content is discoverable and accessible. In more recent years, libraries have been delivering a new service, a library as a publisher service. So the time that we used to sit and spend at the reference desk, let's move that to something that can provide tangible output. The growth of the open publishing movement in Africa must be fast-tracked by institutions that are relatively advantaged. It is incumbent on these institutions to take the lead in sharing scholarly output to engender and nurture a culture of research at those African institutions that are overwhelmed by low research output. Some South African academic institutions via the libraries have stepped up to the plate to make scholarly content accessible, and that was what Ina was saying, the number of institutions that have actually started to adopt OJS and are publishing journals. These libraries offer a suite of what I call, and it's a new concept, diamond open access services. The library as a publisher is gaining some traction as a mainstream provider, as a mainstream service provided by higher education libraries in South Africa. Diamond open access publishing is gaining traction nationally and internationally. And I need to reiterate, it is still very, very slow. There are a number of academic libraries internationally that are pushing the publishing of open monographs. The University of Cape Town is one of those academic libraries that has invested large amount of resources, staff resources, to, I hope Gwenda's not listening, to play around with technology so that we can provide services that are relevant. As much as UCT Libraries has published 7 titles in the last 18 months, it still considers itself in a pilot consolidation mode with regard to publishing monographs in an open access forum. 2 of the 7 titles are open textbooks, and hopefully I'll get time to show you some of this. And these are books written primarily for students and intended to be used in the lecture halls. That's the distinction we make between monographs and textbooks. Textbooks are things that are directly related to the curriculum and related to teaching. Currently, academics at the university are placing their unpublished monographs on their websites for use by fellow researchers and practitioners. The possibility of using open monograph press to convert these websites into published monographs has now become a distinct reality for the university community. The open textbooks that have been published and those that are still in a pipeline to be published address a myriad of challenges, including, amongst others, the spiraling cost of textbooks and the need for local content. These textbooks are available online for free and licensed under a Creative Commons license. This is what students have been demanding over the last 18 months or so. Cheap, in fact, preferably free textbooks. And we are not unique in this. I've been to America recently, and there were two studies done, and they showed that 65% of the students do not buy textbooks. A large number of students choose the courses based on whether they have to buy a textbook or not. And the savings that they make from not buying textbooks is used to buy food and pay for rent. How different is that to where we are in this country now? UCT Libraries has recently published a medical textbook which has audio and visual clips embedded to assist medical procedures. What we have done at the University of Cape Town is we've not taken the hard copy and converted it to digital. We realize that in Africa, there are other challenges. For example, having access to electricity for 7 days a week is a luxury in the better part of Africa. Having access to bandwidth is a luxury in Africa. So when we started to play around with what we wanted to do was we wanted the better part of Africa to have access to our content. And the colleagues then played around with different technologies. So the textbooks that you see, you can actually read on your cell phone. You can download in your cell phone. And then when you go off to the rural area where there is no electricity, where there is no bandwidth, you can be able to see it and to use it in terms of surgery. I'm going to deviate from my slideshow. And this show you some of the things that we have done. This was one of the books that took us a long time to digest before we accept. The primary purpose of us accepting this was that we did a whole lot of adjustments to it so that we can make content accessible. So what we've done is we've hyperlinked the head of department, and then you've got his entire profile. Right? We click on his orchid ID, and then you have all his publications. And given the fact that the medical discipline, a large number of their texts are open access, you immediately have access to all of this content. So our purpose was to make content accessible, and we use this as a medium of making that content accessible.
Clever.
Glenn, help again. The next one. Yeah, this was the other book. This is the one. Okay, it doesn't matter. I will stick with this. Yes, I told you to need to keep. I must be very honest. When my colleagues were working with this book, I never went into the room. These youngsters that are sitting in the far end were the ones that tolerated me giving instructions. But what I did do is I picked up one where there's little less cutting. Okay. And the purpose of this again is people who do not have access to laboratories to be able to see how surgery is done using the latest technology. So, as I said, basically, these are medical procedures that people, the better part of Africa, do not have access to. And here you can now see it and you can actually perform it. The thing is, in Africa, there is a dire shortage of ENT specialists. They never have access to this kind of content, right? But they now do have. I think we can close it.
Do not try this at home.
And another textbook that we have been talking about, the professor wanted ECGs, but he wanted certain areas highlighted. So we told we can now do that, and you can see specific areas, you can zoom in on specific areas.
Oh, wow. Oh, wonderful.
I can show you one more amazing thing.
Brilliant.
And this is the other possibility. You can start looking at certain areas to get.
Oh, wow.
So these are technologies that unfortunately, it's only my young colleagues on the other side sitting there that have the energy to play around with. And I must say, they have not yet tasted failure. So I hope they don't taste failure. Thank you very much, colleagues.